It's great to be here in Washington, D.C. for the second annual National Links Trust Symposium on Municipal Golf. Beautiful spot here in Washington, D.C. I took the train down this morning from Connecticut, where I live with my wife and three 11-year-old boys. I have triplets born 1 minute apart. Probably the most interesting aspect about me is that I'm raising three highly active boys, is probably the best way to put it. But I always enjoy coming to DC. I never get to come here as often as I'd like. And whenever I get off the train at Union Station, as I did today, I feel pretty inspired seeing the buildings, the Washington Monument, the Capitol, as I did earlier today. It just always gives me a good feeling about the country that I live in and the job that I have, which has been in golf now, gosh, for more than 20 years, which is amazing to think. And just getting to know about the National Links Trust and meeting Will and Sinclair and knowing what you guys are trying to do. I think it's such an important role that you play in the larger golf space. You know, a 501(c) national nonprofit dedicated to protecting and promoting really the precious aspects of the game, impacting local communities, for example, across the country. The three municipal golf courses that you operate, one of them, Rock Creek Golf Park, I've actually lost probably 6 to 7 golf balls there when I played there about 15 years ago. The partners that you have, I happen to know them pretty well. Tom Doak, who I once caddied for on a long ago beautiful day in the Hamptons. I'm going to hear from him in just a little bit. Gil Hantz, who's become a friend. Bo Welling, Mike Kaiser, the renovations that you've been doing to restore the golf courses to their, not just to their original beauty and maybe intent, but also making them accessible, and how important that is in this era of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And also the partners, and Sinclair mentioned the partners, National Park Service, Troon Golf, First Tee of Greater Washington, D.C., Youth on Course. I met Mike Lowe out at Pebble Beach when I was out there a couple of weeks ago at Tiger's event. It was a lot of fun. Evan Scholars Foundation, the work that you've done for so many years. Golf, My Future, My Game. Anacostia Watershed Society and the Rock Creek Conservancy. Some of you I've met, some of you I've known, and I've read a lot about the wonderful things that you guys are doing. And nationallinkstrust.org is a place where you can read a lot more. Sinclair talked about what you'll be hearing about over the next 36 hours, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and my journey into this game. I grew up in Van Nuys, California, the 818, if you remember the Valley Boy, Valley Girl kind of era in the 1980s. My parents didn't play golf. I didn't know anyone who played golf outside of maybe a miniature golf like birthday party that you'd go roll the purple and orange and yellow balls around. If golf was on my television set when I was a kid, it's because we were waiting for the NFL to come on. I mean, that's the way it was. Or the Lakers. If you knew the Magic Johnson Lakers in the 1980s, you know what I'm talking about. It wasn't until I got out of college and I was working at a radio station in Los Angeles, a KMPC sports radio, and the station director, Scott O'Neill, said, "Damon, you ever played golf?" I said, "I've never played golf." At this point, I'm probably 21, 22. I'm in my first job out after college before I go to graduate school at Berkeley. Is you got to play golf. You got to get out there and play golf. It's an important game to learn. It's a game for a lifetime, all this stuff. I don't know how to play golf. I don't have any clubs. I'll get you some clubs. So he takes me out to this golf course called Spanish Hills, Oxnard, Ventura, Santa Barbara area. Beautiful, very private. I can still remember hearing like the metal spikes on the cart path and how uncomfortable I felt. But Scott did his best to make me feel comfortable. I shot 144 that day. And despite that score, Scott decided to gift me with irons, Arnold Palmer Peerless irons. I wish I still had those clubs, but that was my first set of golf clubs. And I fell in love with the game. The 144, thankfully, I've gotten a little bit better since that first time. But I still realized that even though I was late to the game, not a lot of people looked like me that were involved in the game. But something about it, being outdoors, the beauty of the game, Tiger in the mid-90s, it's when I was in my 20s and Tiger was coming of age. And I just started to feel more and more at home with the game. But to tell you that when I was a kid, to think I would on television for 10 years talking about golf, or I've written about golf for the New York Times and Sports Illustrated, as an African-American man in this country, I know that it's pretty unique. It's pretty unexpected, pretty unlikely. So I guess the question in this symposium about equity in action is how do we make my story more likely, and not just in the media space, but in the golf space as a whole. Since George Floyd was killed in 2020, I've been asked to speak a lot about DEI and my journey in the game. And to me, equity really means removing historical barriers, cultural, social, structural, political, that have kept underrepresented minorities from finding a home and finding success, whether it be on the golf course or in life or in jobs. One thing I've said, it's about removing those barriers. It's not just about being a nice person or being a good guy or a good gal. It's about recognizing those historical barriers and doing something about it. And I feel like a lot of the people in this room are excited to do just that. So it's wonderful to be here. Let's talk about this game, talk about growing the game in sustainable ways that can protect the game in the future and making the game look like this country that I love so much. I'm excited to share the stage now with a buddy of mine who I happened to caddy for years ago, over 18 holes. He played alongside Jack Nicklaus. Jack didn't make any birdies that day. He was pretty bummed, but Tom Doak absolutely striked it on that beautiful day in the Hamptons. Let's welcome Tom Doak to the stage.
You have a very selective memory about my golf.
You stripe it. Tom, you're one of the renowned architects working today, but out of college, you were just a kid trying to figure things out. I understand you went to Scotland for some time. I'm curious what you found in Scotland from an architectural standpoint and from a cultural standpoint that was maybe different from how you grew up and what you knew golf to be here in the United States.
Well, my story is not much different than you. I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut, where you live now, and fortunately a mile from Sterling Farms Golf Course, because my parents didn't play golf either. And where we lived, if we'd have tried to join a private club, it wouldn't have happened until I was out of school by the time I got interested in golf. So I was lucky that there was a public course close by.
Sterling Farms, you said?
Yeah.
I hit balls at Sterling Farms after work some days. So I just wanted to make sure I heard that correctly.
That place, I think of like a local, it was a farm, and a local farmer, when he passed away, gave it to the city to develop a golf course on it. And Jeff Cornish, who did a ton of golf courses in New England for like $1,000 design fee, did the golf course. So I grew up playing there, and then the only golf my dad played was at a convention once a year, but they went to all the best golf resorts in America. So I saw Harbor Town, Pinehurst, and Pebble Beach when I was a kid. And they were just so different than Sterling Farms that I was kind of fascinated by, oh, maybe there is something to this golf architecture thing. And, for those of you in the room now, it's pretty hard to remember 40 years ago how fringe of a interest golf architecture was. People didn't really pay much attention to golf course architects or who built golf courses. It wasn't until Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer started doing it that all of a sudden it was a big deal. And then, on the back of that, it was like, well, the members of all the good clubs were like, well, somebody good must have designed our course too. Who's this Tillinghast guy or Donald Ross? So that the interest in the business kind of took off right after I got out of school. I went to landscape architecture school because somebody told me that was the closest thing that I could do to study golf course architecture. But I knew it wasn't going to be very close. And fortunately, I went to Cornell, and they pride themselves on letting you study whatever you want to study. And there was a scholarship in my department for someone who couldn't study exactly what they wanted to do, to spend some time overseas, pursuing that. And, I wanted to go to Scotland and learn about golf course architecture from the source. And I thought, well, they're never going to give me a scholarship to go play golf in Scotland for 6 months. I better get some help. So luckily I was, I'd spent most of my time in school writing letters to everybody in the golf business, asking them for advice. And so my letters of recommendation for my scholarship were from Pete Dye, who I'd worked for the summer before, and Dean Beeman, who was commissioner of the tour, and Herbert Warren Wind, who wrote for the New Yorker, and Ben Crenshaw, who was kind of a pen pal of mine while I was in college. So they gave me that scholarship to spend a year in the UK, and that just it changed my life. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about golf until I spent a year over there. And then I was like, oh no, we've got golf wrong.
What do they have right?
You know, one of the simplest ways to put it is golf over there is like, it's a part of life. You know, it's a big part of their culture. And over here, it's a business. And there's just so, you know, we're out of it now in the post-COVID era, but in the pre-COVID era, it's like golf is dying. You know, everything. They're not talking about the sport of golf. They're talking about the golf business. You know, there's no new courses being built. Architects are struggling. There's no place for golf pros to go get a new job. There's no place for golf course superintendents to, you know, move up. So the golf business was struggling, but you go to Scotland and it's like, there's golf courses everywhere and they're affordable. And, you know, it's still a great game. And, you know, I look at those headlines and think, well, it's just, you know, we have a completely different perspective about what we're trying to do. And they're, you know, they really are, that's the grassroots way of getting people involved in the game. I mean, it's like you take your kids out and you go walk your dog and you play 18 holes in 2 hours at the same time.
Yeah. The dog walking is a real thing. I've been out there and played, and I joined a club for like $125 the same day that I played it. Lossiemouth, Moray Old. There's like right next to an airfield. And we liked the course so much. Myself, Hank Gola, Mark Canizero, we plunked down some quid, had a beer at the bar. You know, they gave us some club ties to go play another 4 holes. We'll run your credit card. And then we were members for a year. I mean, it was remarkable. Are we closer in this country to that ethos that you talked about for, you know, 40 years on? Are we closer to that simplicity, that beauty, that kind of everyman woman aspect of golf over there, or are we farther away?
I think some of both. I mean, it's, you know, I see it going like that, where the high end just keeps getting higher. And the bad part of that in my business is, you know, the standard for what a new golf course should be and how well it should be maintained is unaffordable. You know, if you had a piece of parkland over there and you wanted to build a new golf course, you'd be like, it's going to cost $25 million. No, we're not doing that. You know, my very first course in Traverse City, High Point, I built for $1.5 million. I mean, the total project was probably $5 million back 35 years ago. The place closed 10 or 15 years ago. It's been a hops farm for a while, but now I've got somebody interested in reviving the golf course. So, you know, we're doing all the work to put it back together. And, you know, we're going to use like most of one of the nines as, you know, it's still kind of laying there. It's never been disturbed. But it's going to cost $15 or $20 million to put it back together. And I think, well, that wouldn't have, you know, it never would have got off the ground if that had been, you know, and they certainly wouldn't have hired me to do a $20 million project when I was 26 years old.
Why are we farther away, or in some cases farther away? As Americans, we love to go to Scotland. We romanticize Scotland. We want to take buddies trips there. And during the Open, you know, we don't go for the week, we go for 3 weeks and try to hobnob and play everywhere that we can. Like, are things just so entrenched here? Are they slow to change here? Is it the way golf came to be that it became more of a game for the well-off and the wealthy, as opposed to starting off more as a game for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, certainly here, you know, that's why I said it's going like this, because on the one level, there's much more exposure of people to, you know, good golf is more available to the public now than it has been in a long time. I mean, there are some really good public courses that have been renovated. There's some great new resort courses that have been built. It's much easier to travel overseas and get to see all that and wonder why it's not over here too.
Right.
But at the same time, the high end of, you know, private golf and building clubs is like, you know, my new clients have to be private equity guys. They're the only ones who can afford to do it.
What about a project like East Potomac? What excites you about it? What can the people look forward to as that gets off the ground?
Well, that was a really interesting golf course over there. You know, I mean, one of the courses I built a few years ago, I always wanted to do a golf course that you could play forwards and backwards. I did one in Michigan a few years ago, a resort course called the Loop. You know, and my idea for it was based off a little, like a appendix in Tom Simpson's book on architecture. He used to design state courses for rich guys in Europe sometimes. And, you know, they'd only be 3 holes, and that would get really boring to just play the same 3 holes over and over again. So he figured out how to build something that you could play multiple ways. So there's this little diagram in his book, and I thought that would be really cool to do that on a big scale. Walter Travis did that over there in 1922. It was a fully reversible 18-hole golf course, and a third 9 as well. And, you know, it was used that way for a little while, and then people forgot about in depression probably. And, you know, it's just, it's a pretty good location for a golf course. And there's an interesting golf course underneath there somewhere. And I'm really excited about trying to piece it back together if we get the chance to rebuild it.
What are the challenges? What are the opportunities that you see?
The challenge is it's very low lying. They've barely built it high enough to stay out of the river and surface drain in any direction at all. And, you know, in 100 years, it's settled some, so it's even flatter and lower. So there's going to be a lot of drainage infrastructure to make it work. That's the big challenge. And then really, you know, I don't know, you know, with the National Park Service involved, they take the idea of restoration really seriously. They know what that means, but we look over there now and we see a lot of big trees, and there weren't any. So do you restore that, or do you try to keep some of the best trees? And we have to take some out for it to function well as a reversible golf course, because once they got away from that, they let trees grow up in a place that, you know, would be in the way when you're playing the hole the other way around. But most of it's still very functional once we get enough trees out of the way. And then it's just a question of exactly how far do we go toward putting it back exactly like it was.
And maybe you can take some of the trees out and replant them elsewhere in the town.
Yeah.
Possibility.
Yeah, they're pretty big for that these days.
How does this project compare to some of the projects you worked on? Houston, Denver, for example. Are you running into similar challenges, opportunities?
You know, these public projects are few and far between for us, partly because of all the economic considerations I've been talking about. You know, we've done 2 that we're very proud of. In Colorado, we basically built a new golf course on an old golf course site for the Colorado Golf Association called Common Ground. They'd been given the golf course at the closure of an old Air Force base on the east side of Denver. It's surrounded by a middle to lower income neighborhood, pretty open site for a golf course. There's a flood control dam on 2 sides of it, and we got to see how that worked a few years after they built it. The golf course went under 5 feet of water for a while. But the Colorado Golf Association has done so much. They saved money for handicap fees for several years until they got $4 million in the bank, and they said, okay, we want to take this $4 million and make that golf course as much better as we could possibly make it. But we don't, at the end of the day, we still want it to be a $40 golf course. You know, we're not trying to turn it into a $100 golf course and compete with the high-end public golf courses in town. You know, we still have a mission statement for it to be affordable, you know, and we want it to be good enough that we can host all kinds of our own state tournaments on it, like every level of tournament. And they've even used it for US amateur qualifying when they had it at Cherry Hills a few years ago. So just a cool project. And, you know, it's done so much for that neighborhood too. We built a little like kids course over to the side, and it's busy all the time. They run school programs out of it. They've got a caddy and leadership academy attached to the place that donations subsidize kids to caddy for you. So you don't have to pay anything for the caddy. You just tip them instead of taking a golf cart. And, you know, they've sent several kids to the Evans Scholars Program as a result of that program.
Why is that important in your mind? This revitalization in urban golf centers or urban cities like Washington, D.C. You're talking about it a little bit, the kind of ancillary benefits as well for the community, for the kids, for the town.
Yeah.
Why is that important? Because maybe Joe or Jane on the street doesn't see the importance, the community-wide impact that projects like these can have?
Well, at the end of the day, it's just about access. I mean, most golf courses, especially new golf courses, are further and further out of town in the suburbs. And the old golf courses get hollowed out and turned into a shopping center or something else. So when you think about it, at the end of the day, you've got no golf courses close to where most of the people live. And, for anyone, just access to being able to play the golf course or all the other things that go with it and all the jobs that are involved with it, they get out there where, a lot of people can't afford to drive 45 minutes back and forth every day to go to that job, so they don't. So that's the main thing. It's just, having golf in places where people can get at. I grew up a mile from a golf course. If I hadn't, I wouldn't be sitting here.
All these years on, Tom, I'm curious, are you optimistic about the state of our game? And you can take that answer in any direction you want.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic about it. There's a ton more interest in golf these days in all aspects of the game, including architecture. There is just a wealth of young talent in architecture, and I think that probably goes for all the other aspects of the game as well. There's just so much more interest about it generally in the last 25 years. And, our issue is just, being practical enough to take all that talent and give them good things to run with.
Does golf still have a ways to go in the view of the game in urban communities? Because I can tell you from my perspective, my parents grew up in Compton, California, and there is skepticism in certain parts of the country about golf, just because of the way the country came together, the way golf began here in this country. How much work does golf still have to do to kind of cross those barriers, even from a perception standpoint?
Well, it's not only there. I mean, we deal with it like in permitting for new golf courses. You see at the end of the day that there's only 10% of people that play golf in this country. And so 90% are sitting in the audience of a zoning meeting for a new golf course thinking, what's this going to do for me? This is just going to be for a bunch of rich guys. And that's the thing that we have to push back against. And the best way to do it is having some highly visible examples of, no, that's not what this is all about.
Important that the golf courses are more playable as well. We were talking before we sat out here. It seemed like maybe post Tiger winning the Masters by 12, early 2000s, golf courses exploded. 8,000, pushing the game needs to be harder and harder and harder. I'd much rather play a golf course with generous wide fairways.
Yeah.
Let the ball kind of land on the green and kind of feeds toward the hole. Not everybody wants the reverse camber, upside down saucer, Donald Ross.
Wow. You watch too much golf on TV.
And that's my job.
I know. And that's the big problem, though, that's another thing. The perception of golf is what everybody sees on TV every week. And it's a perfectly green golf course that's just, they're holding the tournament at the perfect time of year wherever they are, so that golf course is going to look its best.
Right.
The tour goes to unimaginable lengths. I mean, I was shocked in Houston the first year they played the Houston Open on Memorial Park, all the things that they were doing to just make sure that no spot of brown grass showed up on TV from any corner. I mean, it was crazy. It's like, no, we've got to fix that. We got to resod that area over the other side of the cart path on number 8. And I'm like, nobody's ever going to hit it there in this week. And they're like, no, it's going to be on camera. It'll be in the background on camera. So, I mean, architects too get too caught up in trying to make a golf course challenging for great players, when the truth is, you know, the guys that we watch on TV every day, they're not coming to my new golf course next week.
Right.
You know, everybody in this room is coming to the golf
Right.
course, and you don't need it to be 8,000 yards long.
Right. It's like the Rick Pitino line. No, Larry Bird isn't walking through that door. Kevin McHale isn't walking through that door. Remember that when the Celtics fans were all upset? Anyway, a couple more for you. NLT co-founder Will Smith said that you have an interest in designing a golf course for women.
Yeah. And, you know, so I've got, you know, that reversible golf course is one thing that I had on my bucket list of things I want to do. And building a golf course that's geared more toward women's games is really the point.
Okay.
You know, I think though, just what you've been talking about the last 30 years, and, you know, I'm guilty of it too. We started making golf courses bigger and wider to accommodate new players and just guys swinging hard at new drivers and hitting it long, but also hitting it very wide. So most newer golf courses the last 20 years have been really wide, and it's like the bigger the better. And it's just gotten too far. That's like not sustainable from a standpoint of maintaining the golf course. And it's kind of just pandering to guys that aren't very good. I mean, it's like, why can't we build something that's a little tight and make them learn how to play golf and hit it in the fairway? And that's where but, you know, I could say it that way, but if I say, what if we designed it more toward women's games? Because they hit the ball so much straighter. Part of the reason is they don't hit it so hard that they don't spin it like crazy. But, you know, I've seen tons of women club players that could hit it through a doorway from 150 yards. And there's a lot of guys on the tour that could not hit that shot. So, you know, why not try to get at it that way? Design something that rewards being able to play more precisely, and then let the guys try to figure out, hey, this is not so easy.
Is there a parcel of land you have picked out already, a region of the country where this?
I mean, I need a client who wants to do it.
Okay.
And we'll see where that is. You know, unfortunately, the way I say it, you know, even my wife and Angela Moser, who's been working for me 10 years, are like, oh, that's not politically correct. You can't say it that way. And, you know, I get it, but, you know, it's really just, it's about the golf shots. It's not really about gender.
Couple more for you. What's one thing you wish you knew at the beginning of your architecture career that you know now you didn't know then?
You know,
did I ask that correctly? That was okay. Okay. I kind of stopped mid-sentence. I kind of confused myself on that. But you know what I'm getting at.
I'm not sure I know what you're getting at. The most disappointing thing was that, you know, I thought at the start of my career, you know, I never thought I'd get to the position I'm in now. You know, I'd have been happy building lower budget golf courses that punched above their weight and were considered really good. And it wasn't until I got in the business of my very first golf course. You know, we were designing it on the idea that it was going to be a $50 golf course. And, you know, every decision we made along the way of what kind of grass to use, what kind of maintenance budget we're going to have, we're targeted toward that. But then people started talking about like it was going to be good, and the client changed their mind and tried to open it as an $80 or $90 golf course. And, you know, it wasn't really all designed for that. So it struggled for that somewhat. But, you know, that's the capitalist system we live in. It's like if you do good work, people are going to pay more for it. So they're going to charge more for it. So building a great, affordable golf course doesn't last very long. You know, really affordable golf courses are old munis, right, that are pretty beat up.
Sustainability, environment, water, are those things kind of baked into the cake now? Are they, when you do a project, those things are as important as the water table or the turf grass conditions? How about that, those aspects of golf architecture these days?
They are for those of us in the business. I'm not sure they're that significant for a lot of our clients, but we try to keep them on the straight and narrow about that. And there's a lot more people in the audience paying attention to those things now too. So if we're doing something that's off target, we'll get questioned about it pretty fast. Tom,
I've been peppering you with a lot of questions. I want to leave you with this. I mentioned that I caddied for you many, many years ago. Did I do a good job as your looper?
Well, I played great. You said I played great, so you did a great job.
You did play great. You did play great alongside 18-time major champ, Jack Nicklaus.
Yeah, that was hard. That was a little intimidating, I gotta say. I mean, Jack was really nice to me through the building of that golf course. That, he didn't really co-design with people that much. And we'd agreed at the beginning, we're not done with a hole until we're both happy with it. So there was some weird conversations where one or the other of us wasn't quite happy yet. But to share the spotlight on opening day, I mean, I'm not used to playing in front of 100 people or 200 people. And I'm not, I've played a few rounds with really great players, but Jack's kind of another level of that. So
I kept you loose. I kept you loose.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
And I'm eternally grateful for that.
Before I let you go, and I keep saying 2 more questions, but I do want to know what's like the 1 or 2 things left that you want to do? I mean, you've built golf courses that have hosted majors. You built golf courses for the everyman woman. I mean, it's been a fun career for me to follow as a golf journalist. I played a lot of the golf courses you designed, Stream Song Blue, for example. Like what's left for you to do?
I went through a phase about 5 years ago where I kind of wondered what do I have left to do? I've checked off most of the boxes and things that I could have written down as goals 10 or 20 years ago. You never know where the next great project is going to come from. You think that it's got to be in some great exotic spot, but if you think about it, the best golf course in America, according to most people, is in the woods in southern New Jersey next to a railroad track. I mean, it's just, so you never know where something special might come from. And we're very lucky now. We've got a bunch more opportunities. I am signed up for doing like 10 more golf courses in the next 3 or 4 years. And some of them look pretty good. So, all I need is one new project to keep me busy. And especially that one in my backyard at High Point will make a huge difference.
Well, Tom, you brought a lot of special places to our game. Thank you much for the time, the information, and we look forward to your project just across the river and many more to come. Thank you so much, Tom Doak.
Thanks.